Okay, so I'm now going to refresh the Autism Broadcast Network page. Oh, I'm subscribed. I don't know why I can't see it. You can't see anything, can you, Tony?
Let me check. Did you test it before and make sure you could see it?
Coming this April,
Oh, it's under videos.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Under videos?
So you need to be quiet now, buddy. So we've got to tell people to go to videos.
Yep. You get on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay, I just put it up on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Well, I can see us.
Yeah, I could see us under videos too. I'm just letting everybody know where we're going to be.
Well, I can see us. Oh, so we're on a 5-second delay.
Yeah, I could see us under videos too. I'm just letting everybody know where we're going to be.
Okay, cool. I can see us. So I'm going to turn this off.
Yeah, I could see us under videos too. I'm just
Yeah, sorry, it's doing that 5-second delay on what I'm saying. It seems like with stuff I do, there's always so many kinks that I have to work out.
Well, especially when you're trying to coordinate the tech stuff.
I know, but maybe next time it would be better to do it on both the Facebook page and the YouTube channel.
I think it's fine on the YouTube channel. We just got to make sure people know.
Let people know.
It has to be on that front page, and a lot of people put it on that front page.
Yeah. Okay, well, we are ready to go. We got 4 people watching so far. Thank you very much. My name is J.R. Reed from Not Weird, Just Autistic, and with me is, she always does herself short. She's a good friend. She's autistic. She's an author. She's an entrepreneur. She's a therapist. She works with women on the spectrum at home in South Carolina, and she's just all over the place. Tony Boucher.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's fun. So, Tony, we talked about doing this for the year, and we're going to do this once a month, the first Friday of every month. We're going to do all kinds of topics. Mm-hmm. Next month, we're going to do kids and parents. Mm-hmm. Another month, nutrition and eating disorders, how you can advocate, transitioning teens, self-identification, things like that. Everything that goes into being an authentic autistic life. So, Tony, let's just get right into it. What does leading an authentic autistic life mean to you?
Yeah. So for me, what that means is doing what works for me, what feels right for me, what is based on my internal compass, my internal set of expectations, and that's regardless of how the outside world sees my decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's not just about like something you do or something you think, but there are levels of that. So, it's about, what is my personality like? What are the roles that I play?
Mm-hmm.
What are the values and the beliefs that I have? Where do I go? What do I do? I think when people are authentic, the choices that we make and the way that we choose to show up in the world is based on that internal compass. And that's, Jared, that's really hard for a lot of us on the spectrum, because we got so much strict compliance training as
Yeah.
kids. And
Especially people like us that are, late diagnosed adults.
yeah. And so for me, sometimes it's just simple little things. Like, I remember, the first time I was decided that I wasn't going to pretend that I don't have sensory issues. I was sitting with a client and a truck drove by, and I always had just pretended, like when something was noisy or disturbing or hurt my eyes, I would just always fake it and pretend it didn't bother me. And I remember the first time that I was like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't pretend. And I flinched and I covered my ears. And at that moment, I saw my client looked at me and he covered his ears too. So a big piece to me about what authenticity is when you are living in your own personal truth, then that gives other people permission to do so as well. He was faking it too. And I didn't, I didn't know it, because that's what we're taught to do. So, and for me, authenticity is sometimes really scary. Like, I'm not an expert at this. I'm learning it. And sometimes it means taking a risk and doing something that, is scary. It's outside of your comfort zone, because we learn to do what society expects of us. So how about for you, JR? How do you feel about it?
Well, it's very similar for me, but I think that, and I don't mean this in a derogatory, negative way, but when it comes to autism advocacy, you and I are not the big fishes in the pond. We're regular street level.
We're people.
That sounds like drug dealing, street level, but anyway, we're dealing the autism, folks. We're dealing the autism. I think that people, like you were saying with your client, they do look to us somewhat for guidance, the people that we know. And it is so hard sometimes to be that authentic autistic person, because you want to fit in. And there are times like you think, no, I can handle this. Oh, wait, no, I can't. I think we try to fool ourselves a lot. And that's one thing that we need to stop doing, is trying to fool ourselves and trying to mask. We're not trying to mask and masking.
It's so true. And, I think that's a process. That's not like you just all of a sudden you have some like bells and whistles or lights come down and it's like, oh, it takes, really looking at yourself and being willing to really go deep inside of, your fears and the things that, that were guiding your decisions in the first place. But yeah, the masking is really, I think, the antithesis usually to being authentic. Now, that being said, sometimes you got to make a choice that, masking might be the right decision in a case where
exactly.
Where you've got to just get through and not have, have to deal with the consequences of doing what you would, like to do behind closed doors. And that's okay too, because again, I think we sometimes tend to think in absolutes on the spectrum. And so it's not like you're just 100% authentic all the time. Sometimes being authentic is making that decision to fit in, because the consequences of that are less for you at that point. And sometimes it's saying, hey, I can't fit in right now. It's not right for me. it's incongruous for who I am as a person at this moment, and I need to take a stand and make some noise and get in trouble.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. I've only got one time that I will intentionally mask, and that's when I'm speaking in front of large groups of people.
Mhm.
Like when I spoke in front of 1,500 at the Missouri State Capitol just days before COVID closed it down, I was terrified, but I needed to mask them and see that I wasn't really going to pee my pants. I was going to do it and get through it. So, Tony, if you see at the bottom of the screen, we have an interesting comment from somebody that they felt like they had very little guidance from other autistic people. And that is so true.
Mhm.
So true. And I don't know how we get other autistic people on board. I mean, it's just maybe stuff like this where they can hear, hey,
Yeah.
you don't have to mask. You can be yourself. You can do the things you want to do. You can dress the way you want to dress for sensory issues.
Well, I think my own personal journey, JR, has a lot to do with that. I mean, I remember my decision to come out and be open about being on the spectrum had to do with the fact that I was working with, so many people on the spectrum and feeling like, I'm a person who can speak out. I've been a professional for, 20 plus years. And I am capable of speaking out for myself, and those of us who can do that need to, because there are times in our lives when we can't, or there are people who are out there who can't do it for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think there is a great community of us. Susan Plemons, good to see you. She's working at the ARC right now. She's a great person for
people who work at the ARC all over the country do great work.
Yeah. So, but she's, I've known Susan for years, and she's a really great support to other people on the spectrum. But it's by really like looking at our vulnerabilities and just being willing to share them that I think we can be authentic for ourselves and come to the table for other people as well.
Yeah. We've another comment, the silent wave. I know who this person is. They are another autism and disability, developmental disability, writer for Medium.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's got such a following and a fan base that, thank you very much. And we're going to have you on one of these episodes one of these days.
Yeah. Something I love that Silent Wave does, good work on self-employment. And for you women out there, she's a late diagnosis and had some really good insight for anybody who wants to go the self-employment route and for women.
That's the one she'll be on.
Yeah.
So what types of things do you personally struggle with as far as either the masking or, the living the authentic autistic life?
It's funny. Sometimes it's simple little things. Like I made sure today that I have my tea with me because, for so long I felt like, good, everybody, all you guys out there, make sure you're hydrated. If you need to take a break to go to the bathroom or, just get up and walk around.
You have to take a break to go to the bathroom, take the laptop with you.
Yeah.
So you don't miss anything.
But, it's little things sometimes like that just boil down to like the self-care that I struggle with and have to really make a conscious effort of reminding myself of. And it's, those are simple things, but I think they're really important. For me, clothing is really important. And this is actually something I've always had a pretty good compass on. There are certain clothes that just are not comfortable for me. I was that kid who was screaming and crying because my mom was wanting me to wear socks and they hurt, the seams in socks hurt. And so I think, part of authenticity is making sure you feel your best. And part of that is making sure that your clothes feel good to you. And it doesn't matter what other people think about what you're wearing if you cannot function in your clothes because they hurt. So I think that's a really important one. Things like, how you style your hair and being able to, do those things in a way that feels, right for you, even if you think, oh, well, somebody else out there might not approve of it.
Yeah, no, I think that is the one word right there. Approval.
Yeah.
We mask, we do things that don't make us feel comfortable. And I I I want to say this the right way because I don't mean any offense by it at all, but people like you and I who study this all the time and think about autism and masking and what we wear and what we don't wear. I mean, it's tough for us a lot of times, and I can't imagine what it would be like for others who really don't have the knowledge.
Yeah. Who haven't had the support that we have.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
So I was talking about how masking makes you feel fake. And I think that I love this comment because that's exactly the antithesis to being authentic. And that's what feels so good about living in your own truth is you don't feel like you're living a lie anymore. And that can meet disapproval sometimes. A lot of times, for example, I work with so many people who have therapists or people who are like, make eye contact. I am the last person on earth who's going to tell somebody to make eye contact. I rarely make eye contact. I've survived. I make adjustments. I look at the mouth, I look at the ear. And so it's really, really important to be honest for yourself. And that's,
absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that's the key. There's some of the other things that you're talking about, like little things where I might struggle or areas where I do well with it. I think setting boundaries for us is really important. That's a big piece of authenticity. Going ahead and say no when you don't feel comfortable doing something, or say no, I need to think about that before I make a decision. So many people that I work with on the spectrum get into this pattern of just saying yes to everybody and pleasing everybody but themselves. And that just it's not healthy because you end up losing yourself. So being able to just practice saying no and setting those boundaries is really important.
Susan, I will say this. I have a lot of respect for you as a writer. And now that I know you work for the ARC, respect in that too. In fact, I do subscribe to your work on Medium. So every day, every other day, I get an email in my inbox with your new stuff. And I always love it. So I am happy. And I know Tony's happy to do anything with you anytime.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we got next here?
Talk to me a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, Jared. I was just wondering, were there certain ways that you found like to be authentic in ways that I haven't mentioned?
I think it was definitely after my diagnosis at age 46, because before then I didn't know what was wrong with me. For a great example of that, I covered the Anaheim Ducks of the National Hockey League for 13 seasons, had a season media credential, all the games, the 2 years they were in the Stanley Cup Finals, got credentialed by the NHL for that. But between periods of every game, and this was even before I got diagnosed, I had, and I mean had like capital HAD, to go outside between the periods and let go of pucks and bodies slamming off the board and 17,000 screaming people and loud music. I just had to go basically reboot my brain.
Yeah, I don't know how you did it in the first place.
Yeah, I don't either. And once I realized that it was sensory issues due to my autism, I stayed one more season and then I was done.
So you gave yourself permission at that point, to just be yourself and recognize that that was a limit that wasn't something you should be crossing for yourself.
And another thing I think that really kind of helped me, and I've talked to a coming out coach. He works mainly with the LGBTQ community, but he also works with, for example, corporate businessmen who want to give up their 20-year corporate career and start a bakery. When you're going to come out about whatever it is you want to come out to your family and friends about. And we talked about coming out as autistic people and how it's tough for us. And I was coaching ice hockey in Southern California, and it's a very macho tough, we have no problems kind of thing. And, for me to go out there and tell them all, hey, I'm autistic, I've had a stroke, deal with me.
Yeah. It wasn't much macho.
Oh, but I mean, it was, but that was really tough for me.
Yeah.
Because I knew that the older coaches would understand, but some of the ones that are in their early 20s would be like, oh, that guy's a loser.
You survived. You got through it. But it's hard. And again, this question of coming out, I think, is a big piece of authenticity. It's going to, what's right for you is going to be different for you maybe than it is for somebody else. Some people choose to come out to certain people. Some people choose to come out to everybody. Some people choose to keep it quiet for a while. My own process of coming out was very, very hard because I wasn't, it took me a while to, come to terms with the fact that, to come to terms for myself with the fact that I was on the spectrum. I had a lot of denial and, resistance towards the idea. So people, I think it's really important if you're asking that question of, who do I come out to or when do I come out, that you really, again, you go back to this question of authenticity and what's right for you. And what was right for you, JR, or what was right for me isn't necessarily going to be right for you.
Absolutely.
Each path is different.
I tell people that I think you should just be loud and proud. Like we were talking earlier today when I got a t-shirt in the mail and I said, God, I'm just ordering way too many autism t-shirts lately. But, that's part of it, not being afraid to say, hey, this is who I am. Like autism, seeing the world differently, and letting people know who that is, what that is.
Yeah. When you're able. But not everybody is able to do that. And for those people who are feeling nervous about it, it's okay. It's a process. It's your own journey. You got to give yourself permission to go through that journey, whatever it is for you. Bacchus 93 said being late diagnosed must feel confusing. It's freaking confusing before you get the diagnosis. I think for my own experience, like having that realization was truly a relief when I actually, came into it and accepted it. It was, it changed my life in terms of giving myself permission to be me. I mean, that was part of what opened the door for me feeling, okay, I need to own who I am as a person, and it's okay for me to be different and to be openly different. I'm a quirky person. I'm intense. I'm not everybody's flavor, and I'm okay with that. I don't have to please everyone. So yeah, before we went on air, Susan and I were talking about gender roles and gender identification. And so I wanted us to have a little bit of a conversation about our roles, because this really is a big piece of authenticity and being authentic. And one of the things we deal with today, I don't care, if you're straight, you're gay, you're bi, you're trans, whatever you associate with, our gender roles have changed so much over the past few years that it's scary and confusing. I have a son who's very straight, but it's scary and hard for him to go out there in the world now because, if he opens a door for somebody, they might get mad one time, and then the next time they're mad because he didn't open it. I mean, it's such a confusing time in terms of
and even things like opening the door and the person saying thank you, and you're like, no problem, ma'am. I mean, it's just one of those things that just rolls off your tongue. You don't mean anything by it, but you don't know what they go by. And, one last thing on what Bacchus had to say. I lived 80% of my life thinking that I was neurotypical and a failed neurotypical. Although until the early 90s, I didn't know what the word neurotypical meant. But, I was that square peg being shoved into that round hole for 80% of my life. And when I walked out of my psychologist's office after getting my diagnosis, it literally was like the clouds had parted. And the first thing that went through my mind was, I'm not weird, just autistic. And then that kind of shaped the whole 10 years and beyond.
Yeah.
From that. But yeah, Tony, I do want to talk about what you mentioned, but I also want to mention that we are going to do a whole show on identity and gender identity and all kinds of identity. Lara Coleman's, who is a very well-known autism self-advocate, also LGBTQ advocate. So she's going to get on, and I'm sure we can get Susan to join us then too.
Mm-hmm.
But so, yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I just, again, society has roles that it wants us to play, and that's actually a good thing that we have guidelines and parameters, because then we have expectations that we know, okay, this is how I'm supposed to be in this situation, and that can be good, so that it makes communication easier, it makes things go smoothly when those rules are clear and when they're good ones. So it's not like we want to just get rid of roles completely, because then it would be really chaotic and really scary for us. But we have these rules that society, puts out there, and then we have to make the decision about which roles are right for us and in what cases, because we play different roles fluidly throughout our lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Roles, from day to day, from moment to moment. And I think, again, sometimes, going back to my own rigidity and thinking about, the people I work with, that's sometimes hard to wrap your brain around when you're on the spectrum, because we do tend to think kind of rigidly often about those things. So it can be a lot of fluidity. And I think, having a whole episode just talking about that and getting some real actionable strategies and tools and tips to help, to navigate that and have better self-awareness, in those regards would be really, really good. I'm glad we're going to have a show.
Absolutely. And fluidity kind of flows into something I was going to talk about here in a minute, but I want to take a 30-second break, Tony, and do a shameless plug for the show that I do on Autism Broadcast Network. Tony was my first guest. So we'll be back in 30 seconds. Okay, that was my shameless plug of the night.
So I have to reframe this for us, because that is, when Hector and I first saw this promotion that you did, the word authenticity is the word that I used when I talked to him. And I was like, this really is a true example of who you are as a person. And it really is reflective of your personality, the way you view the world. And so I think it may be a shameless plug, but it's also a really good case in point of somebody really being authentic. I think that's a beautiful example.
Every other Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah. And the shows come out every Saturday, 9 a.m. Eastern.
Every other Saturday.
Every other Saturday on this channel.
On this channel,
So something you mentioned in that little promo is how you love the color purple. And I think
the person who did the promo for me went a little overboard. I made sure to tell him I don't like cabbage. Of course, he throws purple cabbage in there,
That is going overboard.
So I said we were going to talk a little bit about fluidity, and that's where kind of the purple goatee comes in too. Mm-hmm. I was coaching hockey in the Anaheim Ducks youth organization, and I was coaching in their high school league, in their for their competitive level teams that would travel, and then for their in-house recreational kids. Well, I got a team with a couple of autistic kids the first year. I mean, we can just kind of sometimes tell our own, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed the way that they weren't picking up, the drills as I was explaining them to the rest of the team. And we always shared the ice with one other team for practice. And as we had those practices, I would watch, and I saw that there were another 3 or 4 kids on the other teams that were kind of like that. So over the course of the next year, without coming out and telling the hockey director, I want these kids because they're autistic, I was just say to them, I noticed that they're having some problems with communicating with their coach. You want to give me a shot? So in that, I ended up with 6 autistic kids on my team, known autistic, maybe more, who knows? But from 11 to 15, those 6 kids played together, and they learned from each other, and they won a couple of championships. And what I thought was even better is the neurotypical kids. We talked about what autism was and what they kind of struggled with and how they could best thrive, on the ice. And these kids would go out of their way to help them. I mean, I had one kid in particular that he scored most of our goals. And he knew that, I don't let my teams run up the score because I just don't ever want to embarrass the other team. And I said, okay, you've had your 2 now. It's time for somebody else. And he would always get the puck and feed it to the autistic kids right in front of the net, so they would get their chances to score. And I called them Team Autism. And in fact, I took 3 of the skaters and the goalie, because our goalie was a girl who was on the spectrum, and we put them into a 3-on-3 cross ice hockey tournament, and they won their division. So, and I dyed it purple as kind of a motivation one season for the team, and everybody loved it. And so 10 years later or 8 years later, here it is.
Yeah.
But, I think that just goes to show what people can do and how they can thrive if they're put into the right environment. And I wrote an article the other day for Medium. Oh, come on. There we go. For Medium, it was called I'm Being Disabled, DIS-abled. I'm not disabled. And it talked about that it's really not a disability as much as we're put into situations and environments that disable us. And the example I used was of the shopping mall. They're brightly lit, they're noisy, there's just random traffic patterns, and they're crowded. Now, if you would find a mall that was dimly lit, not as noisy, discernible traffic patterns, and not so many people, I'd still be autistic, but I wouldn't be disabled by being in the mall.
Exactly. And I think, going back to bringing this to where we have control of things, I think that's again where authenticity is such a powerful thing, because we can make conscious choices about what we're going to do about those external environments. So, for example, one thing I'm very, very mindful of is my limits in stores, my limits out in public. And rather than feeling guilty or bad because I have those limits, I just choose not to go into those situations because they're a negative for me. They don't allow me to be my best self.
Correct.
And so I make that conscious choice of, anybody who knows me knows that from Black Friday on, you'll never catch me in a store until after the new year, because and even then you might not catch me because it's just not an environment where I shine. Right. And I'm a fish out of water. And we can really make mindful decisions about where we go and what we do in a lot of cases to really bring out our best. And I think that's a big piece of what authenticity does for us. you know, is to allow us to really reach our potential and be the best, you know, people that we're meant to be.
That says it perfectly right there.
You know, when a few years ago we were putting together a conference for professionals to diagnose and treat folks who are really highly verbal and atypical on the spectrum. So the women and really bright, highly verbal men. And my colleague who was putting the conference on together with me went ahead and was like, "Hey, Tony, I'll drive you to, you know, the building." She just knew, because I had been open and honest about what my issues were, that driving and parking, you know, I could get in front of, you know, 500 people and talk to them, but driving and parking was going to be really overwhelming for me. And so she just took that on. And when we can, you know, really be open with ourselves and open with others, that gives other people permission to support us too. And I think that's a really important piece of this, that, you know, there's a lot of people out there who do want to create a sense of community, want to be supportive, want to do, you know, things that are beneficial to other people. And when you give them permission by saying, "Hey, this is where, you know, I need help," then that gives people permission to, you know, step up to the plate and help, like they did for me when I had the conference.
Yeah. And Susan, you are so right. It is hard to remain authentically autistic and maintain a social life.
And in so many ways. I mean, let's just tear this apart for a minute, because it's
A minute,
in terms of
a minute or the next 24.
Yeah, seriously, because it's like where you go, how you get there, what you eat, what you drink, you know, all those social pressures are looming down, and they, you know, they're not compatible for a lot of folks on the spectrum in many ways. So I think for me, the way that I've dealt with that, Susan, is to be really picky about who I choose to have in my social circles. So, you know, making sure that I'm with people who are going to be loving and understanding of who I am as a person and like me for me, so that I don't have to step out of what I feel is right for me. They're not going to pressure me to go somewhere or eat something or do something that isn't right for me.
Yeah, I got pressured recently into something like that, and I swore I will never do that again. And that was Thanksgiving Day. My daughter and son-in-law live about 45 minutes away, but they work at a big resort, at the only restaurant at the resort, and they had to work all Thanksgiving Day and that whole weekend. So a friend of mine said, "Let's go to this crappy," he didn't say crappy, I did, "this crappy Branson buffet and, you know, do Thanksgiving dinner." Well, first off, the crowds were insane. Second off, that was the worst food I've ever had at a buffet. And, you know, I drove home thinking, why did I just do this? I knew it was going to happen. And this comment here about learning in reverse, the feeling of being worthy was earned and part of, just one part at a time. You know, I've often said that our brains are like Macs in a PC world. That we both.
You stole that one from me.
Did I?
Yes, you did.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm glad you're using it. It's a good one.
Tony said that, you know, we're like Macs in a PC world, in that our brains will both get the job done. Both brains will get the job done, but we just do it in a different way. So your learning in reverse is not necessarily learning in reverse. It's learning in reverse the neurotypical way.
Yeah. It's right for you, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned the word atypical earlier, and I think that's one thing we could maybe spend a few minutes talking about, is how we're portrayed in the media as a community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for the most part, they don't put enough autistic characters into shows. But I mean, you've got the exceptions like The Good Doctor. But then on Netflix, you've got both Atypical and Love on the Spectrum. And have you ever seen Love on the Spectrum?
So people have told me I need to. I really so I don't have TV, and I really as a rule kind of avoid shows about being on the spectrum. I'm very critical, and it ends up being a very not a pleasant experience.
Well, on the show, there are coaches that are working with these autistic people as they try to go on dates and do things. And the last time I went on a date over the summer, I was driving home thinking, well, at least I didn't have note cards in front of me with topics and questions. I must not be doing that bad.
But again, that's something I work with my folks in my groups. As a matter of fact, coming up on tomorrow, we're going to be working on note cards and scripting things out, because sometimes that helps. And Jared, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about communication and how that plays into authenticity. And I think it's right here again. Everybody needs something different to shine in their communication. Everybody communicates a little bit differently. And having a script, having note cards is a great strategy. It's a great tool. And I need it myself. I'm thinking especially like when I go to the doctor and I get in there and, there's lights and everything is icky and uncomfortable. And I walk out of there and I'm like, Tony, you work with people on this stuff all the time. You go to the doctor and if you don't write your stuff down and you don't script it out, you'll forget everything you needed to ask the doctor about and tell them. So,
and Susan makes another great point. Of the representation that we have in entertainment, it's almost all men. Mm-hmm. But I also think that might have something to do with the fact that vastly more men are diagnosed than there are women diagnosed with autism. But I personally don't believe, and I definitely want to hear what you think, but I don't believe that there are more men with autism than there are women. It's harder to diagnose.
I absolutely 100%, in my opinion, believe that we have as many women as we do men.
Yeah,
I do not see, in working practically out there in the real world, I do not see more autistic men. They just, we women just look different. And again, the tying that in through to the authenticity and Susan's comment about, needing to see those role models and those examples and those journeys of, the diversity in the autistic community. So much of what typifies the autistic woman's experience is that intensity in masking, and that, part of the reason that women don't get identified and diagnosed is because we're such good fakers. We are so good at being inauthentic, at not being true to ourselves. And that's
Absolutely.
why we're not catching, the label for people. But, when you're not authentic, then that's, what happens is, okay, we end up with these women getting diagnoses of depression, eating disorders, addictions, anxiety. I mean, it's not that we're not getting labels. We're just getting labels that cover a few of our coping mechanisms and not the one that really can create an understanding for us.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
Absolutely. My light went off here, so I'm having a hard time reading my notes. This is great. One thing we didn't really follow up on is, what does it mean to really make those choices that we talked about earlier in, creating your authentic lifestyle?
Like, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
What are the types of things you have to think about as you're, taking all the information, putting it into the brain, letting it soak around a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the first thing is my physical and emotional comfort level.
Yeah.
And, it goes back to those, things like, wearing clothing that's comfortable, or making choices not to go to places where fluorescent lights are blaring everywhere, so that's first for me. and that's I if I'm in an environment like that, I'm certainly not functioning well. So as much as I can make those decisions to not go to places like that and be places that really bring out the best in me, but it's on an emotional level too. And I think that, in terms of what I mean by that is, do I physically feel good? Like, am I not in pain? Do I feel relaxed? Do I feel comfortable? But then on an emotional level, is this environment, or are the people I'm around, do they, do they bring out my best? Do I feel good around them? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel, like these are people that help me to grow and are accepting of me? And we're really, again, in our community, we have a tendency to stick with people who are toxic for us, way beyond
for
what
sure.
we should. And that's not being authentic. If you are selling your soul to toxic people, it's, that is the fast track to being inauthentic.
Yeah.
To
So,
be around people who are unhealthy for you.
I told you the Thanksgiving story. Now, somebody invited me to go with them on New Year's Eve. And so I started questioning everything. First, I was done after one question. So how many people are going to be there? 600. Nope.
Yeah. And it's okay. Like, I really think it's important for people to recognize there's no guilt or shame in that. If 600 people is is above your limit, then that's above your limit. And there's no apology necessary. That's just not an environment where you want to be. Every human being has preferences.
Yeah.
Some people like to be outdoors, jogging and hiking. Some people like to be in front of a computer. They're preferences. And we have definitely distinctive preferences about things that tie into our sensory world. And that's okay.
Yeah. And then there's some of us that sit in front of the computer morning, afternoon, and evening and want to be outside hiking.
Yes, it's so true.
But we don't.
Yeah. I want to go back to this idea though of guilt.
Okay.
I think, because again, I think for the most part, folks on the spectrum, we can be so sensitive and caring towards other people, so deeply empathetic, and we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to make anybody mad. And so when we say no, we can feel guilty or bad about that if we set a boundary. And I think it's really important for us to go through that journey of learning how to not feel guilty about taking care of ourselves and having preferences and being okay with those.
Yeah. And, the comment on the bottom of the screen is something that we don't really think about that much, is the feeling that we get or we deserve where we're at in life.
Yeah.
And we don't. Yeah. We are not poorly created neurotypicals. We're perfectly created autistic people.
Yeah. Baka is such a powerful, powerful statement. And it can be a game changer, because every single person here deserves to be respected and to be allowed to be the shining, beautiful soul that you are.
Yeah. And we deserve so much more than we get sometimes. Yeah. We really do.
Yeah.
And wow, being able to hide autism for 18 years, that has got to be tough on the psyche.
Yep.
And on the physical. But I mean, that day that I spoke at the Missouri State Capitol, I got in my car, I hauled my ass 3 hours home, and I crawled into bed for 14 hours.
Yeah. Oh, I know it. I've been there. It's being authentic, being true to yourself, coming out. It can be terrifying. And I can see why, your son was, hid it for 18 years, because it's scary. It's really scary. And especially if you don't know that there are going to be people out there, to support that. And if you've had, negative experiences, and I'm going to be honest, one of the reasons I really had a hard time coming out about my own, situation was because I'd seen how many of my clients had really struggled and been, mistreated or had really negative experiences and experienced lots of prejudice. I was like, hell, if I want to have that in my life.
That's something with you, Tony, that I really, it's just kind of miracle that it happened the way it did, that you've been working with autistic people your whole life, and then later in life you found out, hey, I'm one of them.
But I don't think it was a miracle. I think I felt connected to these people. These are my people. Like I remember the first time I learned about somebody on the spectrum, and I was hearing all these things about, all these myths about how they were. And I was looking at this person and thinking, they're wrong. I sensed something really deep and profound in this person. And so I was automatically drawn to people on the spectrum and really loved working with them because I feel like I could relate. I understood them.
Yeah. So, we've got about 10 minutes left, and you had mentioned communication earlier.
Yeah.
And my viewpoint on communication has always been, in the last 10 years, I always got to clarify that. Not always been. 80% of my life, I was autistic. But we have to develop a language with the person, the other person, be it your boss, your spouse, your sister, your mom, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. You've got to learn how to understand what the other person means by the inflection in their voice or by their social cues, and just come up with words that you can both understand exactly what they mean.
Well, and I think it's not just about words, but it's really because a lot of us on the spectrum, words are not our first language. A lot of us may, resonate more through music or through visuals or through art, or through just, being together and soaking up each other's energy. And those are all legitimate ways to communicate. And I think it's really, important to really know, okay, what are my strengths in communication? What are the ways that I tend to communicate best and most? And then, develop your communication skills from there. I liken it to having a second language. I mean, speaking neurotypical, you've got to learn some new tools and strategies to broaden your communication repertoire, but really, starting with where you communicate best. When I first started working with kids on the spectrum, I never spoke to them because I knew that wasn't playing to their strengths. I was very kinesthetic. We would get on a trampoline. I would sing. And that's how I did my teaching, because that bypasses the language part and goes to another part of the brain, which I think resonates for a lot of us more. Yeah. And quite frankly, I saw lots of really positive results in not talking to people, but using kinesthetics and music instead. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important to really, take the opportunity to get to know how you communicate best. What is your language? You pulled down Einstein. Do you want to talk to me about that?
I do that. We talk about communication. This is painted by a 12-year-old nonverbal autistic boy.
It's beautiful.
So don't tell me that he can't communicate.
Exactly.
Because he can communicate. And yes, this is Einstein. And he's got, I don't really plug people, but his name is Vichy, Vichy, and it's vichy'sart.com. And he has got so many different pieces of art up there that he's done. And it's just great to see a nonverbal autistic child that can still find their own way to communicate.
Yeah. I think we've really got to start getting in touch with what makes us, what lights us up and what we're really passionate about and what we do well. We're so busy trying to fit ourselves into these boxes that society puts on us. And yes, we have to fit in to some degree, and we have to conform to survive in our world.
Of course.
There's a certain level of that, but not at the expense of who we are as people, and not at the expense of really getting to know how we best, shine. And that's a great example right there of somebody who's communicating deeply. I mean, when I think as a rule, folks on the spectrum, we can be, our emotions are different, but we can be very passionate, very, we can feel very deeply. And when, and we can put that into some format, whether it's, I don't care if it's art or if you play a sport or a video game, it's finding your own way, to communicate.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Tony, we just got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about you and what you do and how you can possibly help people. And I really want to talk about the jewelry program too.
Oh yes. So yeah, I guess in a nutshell, I work with, for those of you who don't know me, I work with teens and adults on the spectrum who are highly verbal. And I help folks reach their employment goals, their social goals, and their health goals. And one of the ways that I do that, I work with a lot of people online all over, but I have some local groups here in Charleston, and I have a gals group and a guys group and a co-ed group that we do. And the women's group has a jewelry store, and they make jewelry. And our last sale that we did in person a couple weeks ago, just before Christmas, the girls had a sale where people came from the community. 2 hours, they brought in over $1,200.
That is so awesome.
And it's so exciting because that money goes to them. We track each piece of jewelry, and whoever sells their jewelry gets that money. So
yeah, and you also co-hosted the Eli Winfrey Show.
Yes, I want to give a shout out to Eli because he's the one who is responsible for us meeting.
He is.
We've been good friends for years, and that's thanks to Eli's show. So Eli had surgery today, so we're sending good on his arm. So we're sending good vibes and lots of love to him for a fast recovery.
Yeah, and also you got your book out too.
Yes, I have a book called Autism Translated, and that's a great starting place for somebody who just wants to better understand maybe, why does my child do that? Or why does this person I'm working with, do this? It's a bridge between the autistic world and the non-autistic world. So it's a great place if you want to understand the experience a little bit more. So
it is a good book, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I've read it.
I'm working on my memoir now.
Oh, nice. I am too. Although that's been for the last 7 years.
Yeah, last 2, 3 for. So you're in good company.
And you can find me at notweirdjustautistic.com. I speak to groups. I'm working with somebody Tony met a couple weeks ago, bipolar and PTSD advocate who has a group called Dungeons and Dog Tags, and he uses Dungeons and Dragons as some therapy for these soldiers. And I'm a veteran, so I was able to get it on the group too. So do that. The show every other week on Autism Broadcast Network. And you can find all my writing at notweirdjustautistic.medium.com. But I know Tony and I would be happy to talk with any of you at some point. You can find me both our websites.
Yeah, Eli or JR. Also, I know you did a really great job of going out and asking people for different, topics. And we got some really great feedback from people on things that, are interesting to know about. And so anybody who has any ideas for future shows or, has questions, get those to us.
Next month, we have coming up kids and autism, and we're going to lump families in there with them. Nutrition and eating disorders, how you can advocate, transitioning teens, self-identification, relating to others. And November is already set, managing the holidays.
That's important. Yeah. It's an ongoing.
But I think if you wait till December, then you've already blew right through Thanksgiving.
Yep.
We're going to do that. All right. Well, Tony, thank you very much for being my co-host for this whole series. And
thank you.
I'm looking forward to it. Follow the Facebook page for Autism Broadcast Network. You can follow it for Not Weird, Just Autistic as well. And there will be updates on both of those pages on our next shows. And I think as we finally get out of here, we had one more person who wanted to say something.
Yes, I want to thank my son, my 12-year-old son, Adrian, for helping me to set up today. He made sure everything was good technically. And he has a message for you. So I can subscribe.
Please leave a like and subscribe.
Very cool. Like and subscribe. All right. Well, Tony, we will talk again soon. And everybody else, Thank you so much for coming. Please tell your friends. The broadcast will be up on the Autism Broadcast Network indefinitely, so your friends can come back and watch it. And we will see you next month.
Yeah, good to see everybody. Thanks for joining us today.